this is an important point. I think you and I sort of have a lot of similarities in that, like, we saw years ago the really negative influence the Chinese Communist Party was having on the United States. But a lot of people didn't see that. But now with the coronavirus, things have changed a little bit. And I want to talk about a story you guys just covered on human events, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was conducting experiments on transgenic mice, which is a way of saying human-animal chimeras, trying to get bat coronaviruses to be more infectious to humans. And they were doing this in 2019. Do you think they were successful?
Well, so here's the thing, right, is that there's a variety of experiments. And we've been digging into the Wuhan Institute of Virology very closely. We've been looking at this. And, I'm not one of those guys who is like, oh, Dr. Fauci, I don't listen to anything he says. I know I listen to everything he says. And I listen very, very closely to the things he says. And I remember those early task force meetings where we were told very specifically at those briefings that this thing, COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 is the official name for it. We all called it Wuhan coronavirus, by the way, at the beginning.
Even in Chinese state-run media.
Yeah, that everyone was calling it that, right? And he said the reason that it was so there was the R naught number, right? The reason that it was so infectious, that it spread so quickly, was that it had a spike protein that fit almost perfectly with the human ACE2 receptors, which are found in human lungs. And I said, wow, that's okay. That's very interesting. So this spike protein fits directly in. Humans, got it. Understood. Wrote it down, mental note. Then when you look at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and you start looking at these programs that they were doing and this research they were running, some of it, of course, we not later found out was funded by the NIH, but not all of it, through these, EcoHealth and Peter Daszak and all these sort of front companies that they run. And you find that they were humanizing the mice to have these ACE2 receptors in their lungs, because they found that when they and this is even prior to 2019, this is going back to 2015. You even see some of this experimentation going on all as far back as 2007, right? And these are the gain of function, right? These are gain of function experiments that they said, well, it wasn't working out because mice lungs don't have the same ACE2 receptors as humans. So what do we need to do? We need to humanize the mice, right? So they come up with this process of humanizing the mice to give them these ACE2 receptors. Then they're going through like a roulette wheel of these different coronaviruses that they all glean from this cave outside of Kunming in Yunnan province, which is about 1,000 miles away from Wuhan, for people who don't know the geography. That's all the way down by the Vietnamese-Laos border. That's practically Southwest Asia. This we're now talking about Southeast Asia. This now is Wuhan is like kind of like Central Eastern in terms of China. It is interior, but you see the very same phrases all over again. Spike proteins of the coronaviruses are now fitting because we've humanized the mice to have the ACE2 receptors. And so to me, this, just looking at it as someone who, I don't have a biology background, but I have an investigation background. And I say, well, what's going on with that? So you call up the experts and you call up epidemiologists. And I've spoken to microbiologists and toxicologists about this as well. And they said, a lot of the things that we're looking at definitely seem to be, these are clearly mutated viruses that have come out here in these cases. These are instances where we're definitely talking about gain of function experiments. And I said, just look, is it possible that this could have led to the initial creation of SARS-CoV-2? I'm not saying did it, right? I'm not saying that's 100% what happened, but just looking at the data here, can somebody who has the background in this, and they said, yeah, it could. But what we would need is the actual data. The actual data on this stuff, it's scrubbed. You can't find it. The NIH database, where they had initially put up some of the genomic sequences for the early patients of COVID-19 from Wuhan, at least the ones that they had publicly acknowledged. China pulled them back out of the NIH database, and the NIH let them be under this international agreement that they had had. So going back to the sort of the marriage of the 1% with the CCP. So there's an international agreement that if they can just ask for their data back, we'll delete it, give them their data back and say, hey, no harm, no foul, no copies of it as far as we know. And the NIH won't even tell us, who specifically requested it back. I'm pretty sure I know who did, but or at least have a list, a pretty short list of who it was. They won't even tell us who made the request unless we file a Freedom of Information Act with the NIH, right? So our own government won't tell us who in China it was that took out this data because they're worried that we might find out what was actually going on. So you look at who's protecting who in these situations, and they realize that they have a problem. And you can see this in so many of those emails from Dr. Fauci that came out, where he's asking these very same questions that I was asking, just in terms of a guy who has the investigation background. I was a Navy intelligence officer looking into this, following the trail where it leads to the Wuhan Institute, right? And even to a story that we did, and we have this by way of WikiLeaks, where there was a cable that came out from the desk of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, rightfully, by the way, saying she's about to have a meeting with the French and it's on bioweapons. And she said, this is all the way back in 2009, but she says, hey, I hear France is about to start working with China to start setting up a BSL-4 laboratory in Wuhan. That is something that we know that bioweapons could come out of those facilities. And we'd like to know, are you sure that you've given them full procedures for containment? Do you have a way of surveillance? What are the different methods that are being used there to ensure the safety of this thing? So you've even got the State Department under Hillary Clinton all the way back in 2009 asking the very same question about what exactly is being created in that lab.
What I find so fascinating about the story is that it's like we just believed everything that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was saying, that Shi Jinli was saying. It was like, she did, Scientific American did that kind of puff piece with her last year. And they were just like, there's that part where she was like, oh, well, I was worried it could have come from my lab. And then I searched all my records and I was so relieved it didn't come from my lab. And then they were kind of just like, well, okay, then,
Well, have you seen her latest? I think it's with, she did an interview with NBC. So, okay, just last week, and I keep meaning, I just haven't personally had time to do this. I keep meaning to clip this and put this out. So she does an interview where NBC goes back and they get some kind of access. And she does this interview with them and she goes, well, there's a lot of myths that are being spread on the internet about my work. And they say that we were up to no good and blah, blah, blah. She actually says that. She says, blah, 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 but really, we're not doing anything like that. So they can take all their blah, blah, blah. And, she just kind of downplays it like that. So it's even she is going back and becoming a little bit more hardline on this, where you're right, in that initial interview, which I wish she probably wishes that she didn't give, where she said, yeah, I went back and was checking the records. I was so worried. Now she's saying, oh, that's just a bunch of internet talk. That's a bunch of blah, blah, blah. No, it's not a bunch of blah, blah, blah. And if it were, you wouldn't have a problem showing us the data. And this study, which we mentioned, but we didn't get into, that we've discovered was listed, that was supposed to have started in 2019, January of 2019. There was a study up by a researcher named Hu Bun. And what we found is we couldn't even find any information about the study. We only found the funding approval for it that came down a year prior in 2018. So we found this document on an archive site from the Chinese Medical Journal of Science that said, we are going to be conducting this experiment with transgenic mice, the pathogenicity of 2 new bat coronaviruses that was supposed to start in January of 2019. That's on the archive site, and it was supposed to run all the way through December of 2021. You try to find any information about that study, any information about this guy Hu Bun, or what was going on from it, it's wiped. It is wiped clean. It is scrubbed. The Wuhan Institute has taken it down. You ask them about it, they won't talk to you about it. And now that Peter Daszak has rightfully been called out on his lies and his cover-ups in conjunction with the Lancet and everything else, I think people know that story by now. they're now rolling out this new doctor, this Australian doctor, Dr. Danielle Anderson, and she's coming out saying, well, I worked in the lab and it was very safe, and I didn't even see anybody who is sick. Well, okay, it's a big lab, Danielle. We know there's a lot of people there. We know that. And again, in many of these instances, you probably weren't privy to everything that was going on there, because we know there were ties to the PLA. We know there was classified information, classified experiments that were going on there. And so that is why we are going to keep digging. So the bottom line is, if you Shizheng Li, if you don't have any worry about what was going on there, then show us the data, right? Show us the data so we can move on and go back to looking at bats, or go back to looking for this intermittent species, whatever it might be, maybe a pangolin, maybe it's a civet like the original SARS. We don't know. But the fact that they won't let you have any access to the data, and the fact that they're scrubbing all of this information, they're taking down information about these studies, especially the one that started in January of 2019 that Human Events has reported on, those are the questions that get people wondering what's really going on there.
I think it might just be because there's nothing questionable in the data that shows anything bad that they were doing. So why should we in the West waste our time going through it? And that makes sense why they would have scrubbed it, right? It's just to help us not waste our time.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they just scrubbed us because they don't want us worrying about it. They want to put us at ease. They just I'm alive, 没关系. You have so many other things to be worried about. And also from a higher level, I just like to say thank you to Xi Jinping for providing us with so many access points to this information about the pandemic when it came out, certainly letting us know as soon as there was a problem. He let the world know. And of course, he shut down the international travel from China. Oh, wait, no, that's not what happened, is it? No, in fact, they shut down domestic travel, but they allowed international travel to continue. And in fact, we're starting to get indications that they may have known there was a problem as far back as October of 2019, when they held the World Military Games in Wuhan, where you had Western, Canadian, American military athletes that were traveling to Wuhan to participate in these. It's kind of like a mini Olympics for the military that was going on. And you look back at some of those pictures, and you're talking now to some of the athletes that were coming back from that, and they're saying, yeah, we all had respiratory infections. In fact, I haven't run this completely to ground yet, but I actually had, what's the best way to put this? So I had a couple of sources reach out to Human Events recently who were on a tour. They were on, those riverboat tours they do in China. They're just American tourists who happened to be in Wuhan in October of 2019 who had come back, and they said, look, we are convinced. We all were sick. Every single one of us came back sick on this trip, and we are convinced that this is what this was, either COVID-19 or one of the early variants of this thing, because we had all the symptoms. We were specifically in Wuhan. And they said that when they were in Wuhan in 2019, October, this is very interesting to me. They said it was like a ghost town all the way back in October. So it's almost like sort of like quasi lockdowns had already begun in October before they'd even alerted the world about it.